Welcome to the Life Transform podcast. I'm Simcha.
And I'm Sarah, and we are here chatting, sharing real life, real stories,
Deep truths, all about living a life transformed.
It's all about how God impacts our life and how we're changed and how our life becomes a significant impact in the lives of other people.
We're going to be here every week for this season.
So make sure that you subscribe and join the journey.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Life Transform podcast. I'm here, Simcha, here with...
I am Sarah.
And we're here today to talk to you about all kinds of very exciting and important things, as always. But we thought today we'd kick off with giving you a update / information download about our current fitness journey that we're both on. And of course, because it's us, it has to be together.
Well, if you were around for episode, well, I don't remember which episode, but season 1. And if you haven't listened to season 1, go back and do it.
Yes.
You will know that we spent a little bit of time talking about fitness and strength and all, the dangers of it, really, because you can die, if you try to get fit. So,
It is daily people dying of going for a run. People just dropping dead all over the place.
It's a fact. They do. So let's just recognize that just for a minute.
Similar numbers to those who die from vending machine related incidents. But yes, it's a risk. You're right.
There is a risk. And I think it needs to be acknowledged. I think people need to have the space to be okay with that.
Yeah. So
meanwhile, if you don't know this, Simcha has dragged me to CrossFit.
You're welcome, darling.
And I have to admit, I spent the better part of 6 months being petrified, literally scared of going every time. So I don't know if you know this kind of the sense of fear when fear sets in your life.
I have that every time she says we're going to be doing skipping.
It's dread. This dread comes and I'm literally afraid of it. And I have to I used to, okay, this is going to be really funny, but I literally used to not go on a walk on a day that there's CrossFit because I didn't want to spend any amounts of energy that I would need.
Are you kidding?
No, it's real.
That's amazing.
For CrossFit. That's how scared I was of it. But I have to say, I feel like I'm getting stronger.
Oh, you are. That is very evident. You can climb up a rope to the ceiling. Who would have thought you'd need to do that in life?
I know. I should tell you that Simcha here can literally swing from, what are these called? The monkey bars or whatever. She's got a lot of strength.
Yeah, it's the curse of being, athletic build. Being bigger but stronger.
Very strong. Yeah.
No, I've really enjoyed CrossFit. I feel like we've got a really good little community going there. And it all started because a girl in our neighborhood wanted to start training people, and it was literally opposite our house, like in the park, in our neighborhood, 10 seconds walk away. And I went the first time and really enjoyed it. And then it got bigger.
Said nobody.
I did enjoy it. I felt like I'd finally moved my body. Lockdown effects of Netflix and chocolate day after day after week after week. Finally to be able to go outside and move it felt good. Especially for me with my back problems that I've had, it's really strengthened my core and my back. So I've had a lot less back problems since doing CrossFit, which seems counterproductive in my head because you're putting so much pressure and strain on it all the time, but it's really helped. But the friendships that have grown in the group and the women that we've connected, especially from our neighborhood, there's a ton of women from our little neighborhood, which is very, very community focused, have all kind of become really good friends through doing it. And I really enjoy going. It's really fun. And you get to do really stupid things that you never would get. I'm doing handstands again I've not done that since I was about 12 years old. And it's great. It's fun.
I'm not enjoying going, but I am being faithful.
And I'm not going to feel bad about that.
my daughter is also doing it, and she is just really gifted, I think, athlete. And
She's
so
so
it's
annoying.
It's nice to do together, like a mother-daughter kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think because I have you and her, it's kind of an accountability partner, if you like. Because without it, I wouldn't do it. But I do have to say, it's given me a sense of faith in my body. Like if you said to me, hey, let's, climb up that rope, or let's run up that hill or something. Whereas 6 months ago, I'd be like,
no.
no. Now I'm like, hey, it's changed. It's kind of given me this can-do attitude, about, what my body's capable of doing. And I do think we should acknowledge, we're not getting any younger. And so being able to maintain strength,
what are you talking about?
Just being able to maintain strength in your body. I really believe that it's part of being faithful to God, maintaining your body in a place where you can do what he has for you to do. And so if you are not doing that, and I'm not talking about people who have medical conditions or other weaknesses that are in play, but if you don't have that,
it's the best of your ability.
Yeah, exactly. Maintain your strength.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that's done for me.
Yeah, I definitely have regularly said to my husband that he needs to prepare himself, because I am going to be the worst old person ever. My body has caused me so many problems, and I like to think, on the younger end of life.
Maybe
I'm just kidding myself.
No,
but
you're very young.
I'm very concerned that the rate of deterioration that I have already felt in the first half of life is not going to help me very much in the second half. So to be able to go to something that is making me feel healthier and stronger and, more alive, I guess, and taken away some of those issues, it's been a little bit of it might not all be terrible.
So if you're sitting here listening to it and you have suffered from a year of lockdowns, just like the rest of us,
join a CrossFit gym.
Find something. Well, not necessarily CrossFit, but find something that gets you moving, that gets you feeling better, stronger. It boosts your immune system.
Yeah.
Just gives some energy, and I think that's just great. Yeah, I feel good when I've done it. Like at the end of the hour, I'm really proud of myself for sticking with it and doing it.
Yeah, all those times when you haven't vomited or wanted to faint, you feel great. It must be made very clear at this point that we do work very hard for an hour.
Yes.
So it's good when it ends.
I struggle at the beginning of the hour, and then as time goes on, this kind of determination sets in, and I just kind of go into autopilot mode. I just get it done, That's actually, CrossFit is nice because it's broken down by times.
Yes.
So you kind of commit to a short thing and then you move on, and I think that helps. Yeah, that helps.
It's not a endurance long. Yeah. But one of the things, this is actually going to be a great segue for us to go into our topic today, is that sometimes, occasionally, more and more recently, because our coach has now got her own place, and so her club is growing, which is great for her. But we have observed that there are occasionally these young men, how dare they, show up and come to our classes, which has always been all girls and all women from our neighborhood. But suddenly it's growing, and these guys are coming in, and I have noticed that there's a brand of young man who seems to think that if he takes his shirt off and do like really unnecessarily difficult exercises in all the breaks, that somehow, I don't know what, everyone will like him more. I mean, what's he trying to achieve here? Impress us? We're like old enough to be his mother. I don't know what the deal is there. But I've noticed that I have not been comparing myself to him. Particularly, obviously, I'm thinking of one individual here, but it has happened a few times that guys have done that. Specifically guys, no girls have ever done this.
I think that's probably why also you haven't compared, and like if there was another woman in there like hitting it, it might be harder.
Maybe.
Yes, and they're so far in age, and it's just very different. But yeah, I think among themselves they do. It's funny to watch, among the younger guys, kind of compare.
But I've also noticed, even just in and amongst ourselves as women, there's not been a comparison thing. Like, everybody moves at their own pace. They do their best. They push themselves. And, you know, the coach is there to push us. But actually, everybody comes in at a different ability level and is told to do different numbers of reps and different numbers of this and amount of time. And the comparison element is just not there. So it's actually been a really healthy way to get fit, because there is just, you're not trying to be like somebody else or beat yourself up because you're not like somebody else or whatever.
I think that's a really good point. Now that I suddenly think about it, one of the reasons that I've been able to stick with it is that it doesn't have the element of competition, this particular group, this particular class, because, you know, I always observe this. I think, you know, when you go, let's say you go to a gym and everyone looks like ripped, you know, and they all are like, and then you're like, where are all the, you know, fat people like me?
The frumpy ones.
Yeah, like, you know, that are getting to that point.
I tell you where they are.
And it's daunting. You don't want to go into that environment.
You go at 7:30 in the morning when all the old ladies are there, and they sit on the cycle machine and they do like 3 circles with their feet, and then they've finished their workout and it takes them half an hour. That's where they are, and that is why you go at that time, because then you feel like the really fit thin one.
Okay, so the truth is that we do live in this world of comparison. Yeah. And there is that competitive element. Now, competition in and of itself isn't necessarily evil, but in our fallen nature, competition and comparison is something that is so negative and causes so many problems, both for us as individuals and for, let's say, a group, if even in a group of believers, if some of that comes in. And I think that it's just so real and natural. You know, on Ascend, we have our general program also on iAscend, and then we have tracts, and our tract times are times where we break out into smaller groups and we focus on a particular area of talent or of skill. So we have a creative track, we have a worship music track, we have a prayer track, we have a leadership track, and I lead the worship track. And part of what we talk about and deal with, and I know that I had a really interesting conversation on iAscend. We have some of these conversations that are taped and filmed, talking about this dynamic. Even, let's say, within a worship team, which is, you know, supposedly a very well-meaning scenario.
It can be a big problem.
It can be this maybe not competitiveness, but comparison and this idea that we measure ourselves as compared to other people, and what that kind of, and how destructive that dynamic can be, you know, in a worship team. And I think the first thing that's really important to recognize in this idea of comparison is that, you know, this is so foundational. If you can grasp this will really change everything for you. If you're suffering from this comparison, or if you have this kind of place of comparison in your life that's bringing you down, we always compare, quote unquote, up. We never compare down. Our natural tendency is to compare up. So let's take weight for a minute, right? Yeah. Do you observe the people around you who are maybe not at their goal weight, you know, but way off compared to you? No, we look at the people whose bodies are, you know, not what ours are and what we want them to be. We always compare up. You know, let's say you are a vocalist on a worship team, right? You know, are you comparing to the people who haven't even made the cut because they just cannot sing? Or are you comparing to the person who always gets to sing the best songs because she's got an incredible voice? You know, we're always looking up. We're always comparing up. Let's say money is a thing, right? We're looking at people who have the bigger house, the nicer thing, the whatever it is, the better car, I don't know, you know, the expensive whatever. We're not looking at the person, you know, in a third world country who can't even afford to send their children to school. Like, we never look below us. And I was thinking about this concept, and I was breaking it down in my mind, and I started to think, does this principle truly apply to everyone? So let's take housing for a minute. let's say you're comparing, down. So for example, I've been really, really blessed. Together with our family, we live in a freestanding home. So you can compare down, let's say, to somebody living in a not freestanding, an attached home, and then you can compare down to someone sitting in an apartment, right? And then you can compare down to somebody living in a
studio,
a very difficult neighborhood, let's say, right? Because there's different areas of town, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, like what's the lower of that, and you can get to somebody who's living in a tin hut, and and what's the lower of that, and you could get to a person who's living in prison. Like you can always go down, but we don't do that. We always look at what we don't have instead of looking at how blessed we are.
It's true. Actually, I was just reminded of a funny story. I was recently in a city about 45 minutes south of us, which is notoriously wealthy. And I was driving around with an architect who's designed a bunch of houses in this area. And he was showing me this one road where this is what happens. Everybody is comparing to the next door neighbor and trying to one up them. And it was hilarious because you started at one end of the road and you had nice house, nice car, maybe one car, maybe two cars, I don't know. And then the next house is a bit bigger, got a bigger front door, got a nicer car, maybe three cars. By the end, you get to the end of the road and it's just stupid. I mean, it's so overcompensating. It's the classic more money than sense thing. And on this one street, you can just see that the further down the road you get, the more you're trying to prove, one up everybody else, compare that I can do better, that I can be more impressive, I got more, I'm going to flash it in your face more, and you've got 5 Lexuses outside your house and a Dubai palace that looks ridiculous here. And it was just, I was driving down the street and just thinking to myself, this is just so toxic to feel so not enough that you have to do these things in order to prove that you're there. But it's exactly what you're saying. If you look the other way around, it just changes your perspective on everything, because there's gratitude, which we've talked about in our previous episode about how that can be, such a healing thing actually to so many different situations. But it also removes the competition. It removes the need to prove yourself, the need to get affirmation from people about your stuff or your thing or what you're doing or whatever. And actually it makes you enough as a person. And I think so often when we do this comparison thing, it's actually not about the house or the car or the weight or the whatever. It's actually, you need it to feel validated as an individual, as an identity. And it can in itself become such a toxic thing because you're looking for everything else to define you as a person.
So good. I think that this is really getting at the core of it, which is what validates you.
Yep.
What affirms you, what validates you. And if your validation is coming because you're looking outside of yourself, in the most negative way, comparing down and feeling good about yourself, that would be horrible. I think that it comes from a lack of understanding this truth, that you are made unique. You are made in God's image and you are made unique, completely unique. Literally, no fingerprint of anyone on the face of the earth now or that have ever lived or that ever will live is the same.
Yeah.
Do you know that no grain of sand is exactly the same? No leaf on any tree, get this, of all the trees that have ever been, it in itself has this minute detail that is unique to it. That is our God. That is how God has created everything in his creation. And certainly us as people, as humans, as individuals, we've been made unique. We've been made with a specific purpose and we've been made singular. And if we lose sight of that and we try to be something else, we're robbing, this world of what God designed over our lives and dreamed over our lives by kind of trying to be somebody else or trying to be something else.
Yeah, so true. I think that's a really big thing to acknowledge is that the unique contribution that we all get to make to the story. And the minute you compare, it's like, I mean, I know people say, oh, it's like chalk and cheese, you can't compare them, but it is actually that. You can't compare your contribution to God's story alongside of someone else's, because you're not the same. You're not the same. You can only compare things that are identical, and even identical people are not identical in any way. You know, if you have two identical phones, the same make, brand, size, everything is, the specs are all identical and they behave very differently, then you can compare those, because something on one of them isn't working as it should. But you cannot do that with people, because we're not all supposed to behave the same and not all supposed to contribute or perform in the same way. And I think, you know, especially, I don't know why, I think women maybe suffer from this more than men, although maybe not. I don't know. I'm not
maybe
a man.
In different ways.
Very different ways.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I've noticed is that the minute I start to compare myself and my abilities or gifts or talents or contributions to someone else's, my creativity is gone. Like, it just kills it. It just kills the creativity. I'm not inspired by the right thing anymore. And all I'm trying to do is up somebody else or become somebody else. And that's no longer creative. That's not actually, that's not representing the image of God anymore as a creator. It's, I don't know what it is. But it's not who God is. He didn't copy somebody else. He didn't try and one up a different God. He didn't try and, he breathed new things from nothing, individually, unique every time. And that's what I'm supposed to do. So if I start to try and copy or replicate somebody else's gift or talent or ability or contribution, it's no longer creative. And so it just kills it.
I love that. Probably something people don't know about me, but I love gardens. It's a big deal for me. I designed my own garden, and I really, really love looking at gardens and creating spaces, outdoor spaces. And I liken this idea that we're talking about to a garden. Yeah. So if we look at God's garden, if you look at the Garden of Eden, you know, how God made the garden, you know, versus our idea of becoming, you know, comparing and competing and becoming like other people or what they have or what they are or who they are. So I talk about this also in the worship track. So imagine the most beautiful red rose you could imagine. I mean, stunning, literally the most beautiful, such a beautiful flower, the most perfectly formed petals, rich, gorgeous flower. It in and of itself is so beautiful and so to be admired, right? But if you create a garden and all you do is you replicate endlessly this red rose over and over and over again, I mean, what does that actually look like? Like a funeral, you know?
Seriously.
It's not representative of life. And here's why, because if you look at the garden as God made the garden, it's got so many different flowers and colors and textures and shapes and sizes and fragrances and leaves and stems and so many shapes and forms. And that's what causes that beauty to come together when you design a garden, you know. So we need to look at humanity, at us as people, like a garden. We are not made to be the same. If I look at what is a beautiful rose, you know, really just gorgeous, but I'm not called to be that rose. I'm not called to be that person with those skills in that position, in that place. And I try to make myself that. I'm never going to be happy, because guess what? I probably don't have what's needed to be in that place. And B, I'm depriving, you know, God of this beautiful story that he's trying to tell through the diversity of people. And so I really love that reference of the garden. Think about that, you know, each of us, we have this beautiful shape, this beautiful fragrance, this beautiful color that God has put into us. And in order to manifest God's creation, we need to manifest in those unique ways that God has made us unique.
It's so true. I actually have just been sitting here thinking about all the different kinds of plants that are in your garden, and how it would look really rubbish if there was only one of those everywhere, or only ground cover with no height, or no star of the show moments, or no big trees, or no, like, every single thing is a different shape, a different size, and does a different function to create a full picture, which is obviously an amazing, second story of the body that's in the Bible. We are made to be one body, and everybody has a different place and space for that. But I think what I found really interesting, Sarah, you've spoken a lot about how you lead the musical, the worship track on Ascend, and I do the creative track. And I think one of the things I've noticed with creatives especially is when you, in that first meeting, you meet them and there's a whole room full of people who are all doing completely different creative expressions, and they introduce themselves by putting themselves down. So it's, I'm a photographer, but I'm not really that anything special, and I don't have a website, and I've not really, I've had any exhibitions, and but yeah, that's who I am. And it's like, you've disqualified yourself before you've even given anybody an opportunity to get to know who you are. And I think that's something that, I don't know if it's false grace or false humility or something. I don't know what it is, but it's like, if I disqualify myself before anybody else does, then I'm safe. And I think that's a really common thing that we do is, I am a musician, or I am a gardener, or I am a whatever you are, but I'm nothing special, and I'm no good at it, and you don't need to pay any attention to me, and blah blah blah. And it's kind of like the opposite of one-upping somebody. It's like preempting the put down, and making sure nobody can take you down.
So good, because that's essentially the parable of the talents, isn't it? So let's unpack that one for a minute here. So we've got three people in this story. We've got the guy who gets 5 talents from the master, who's going to go away for a long time. There's the guy who gets 2 talents, and then there's the guy that gets 1. And I think you're kind of describing right now the guy that got 1 and hid it in the dirt, or he buried it, right?
Yeah.
He buries it. And it's so sad. He's such a sad person, because when you read the parable, the reason that he does it is because he says, you, my master, you were going to be so angry if I lost it, whatever. So I did, my best to keep it and save it and whatever. And the master, he didn't want that. He wanted him to go out and risk. He wanted him to go out and try. He wanted him to use the talent that he had given him. And that's what God wants from us. It's not about how much we got. It's about what we did with what we got. And the heartbreaking part about the guy with the 1 talent is that he didn't recognize who he was, because he didn't know the true nature of the master. He had told himself lies, like we just talked about the the battlefield of the mind in the previous episode. He'd sold himself so many lies about who his master was that he wouldn't even dare.
Yeah.
And that is not God's design over us. And that comparison, I wonder sometimes if he was offended, if he was hurt that he only got 1 talent, and he was looking at the other guys that got more, and he let that offense sink in, and he stopped himself from using his talent. And then we have the guy that got 5, and he does really great. And who among us do not know people who are just like gorgeous, talented, everything just, so happens to them in life. Fine, great. But I want to talk about the guy who got 2, because I think no one ever talks about him, and I think he's actually the most incredible guy in the whole story. And here's why I think the guy with the 2 talents is super important, because the guy who gets 2 talents, we don't see that he goes through some mind game about why he didn't get 5. He just gets on with it. He does the best that he can with what he was given, even though it wasn't what the other guy was given. We don't have a whiff of competitiveness or this comparison, mind trap going on. He gets on with it. He goes out there and he does it. And do you know what? The response to his actions, what he was able to accomplish. And the guy with the 5, they both doubled what they got, right? The guy with the 5 brings back 10. The guy with the 2 brings back 4. The master's response is the same. Well done, faithful servant. So all we're to do is to be faithful with what God gives us. And I think that guy was able to do that because he had blinders on. He didn't look at the guy with the 5 and get upset. He didn't go, well, why didn't I get 5? I'm just as good as the 5. Or I've done so much for my master. How come he hasn't recognized it? Or, allowed these paths of offense to come in, and allow dissatisfaction and resentment. And there's so many traps that go along with allowing that place in our life of comparison, or even allowing this kind of unhealthy competitiveness to be in our life. It's being able to be happy with our lot, being able to be happy with what God has given us. I think a lot about Abraham and Lot. Okay. So when Abraham and Lot, when their shepherd boys don't get along, they decide we need to part ways. And I love this moment. Abraham says to Lot, pick the country you want, And so Lot looks out at, the far country that he can see, and he chooses the better, greener, more beautiful place. And where does that lead him? To Sodom and Gomorrah. And yet Abraham is the one who entertains angels at his tent, Yeah. So not all that glitters is gold.
It's so true. It's so true. I think it's really easy to assume that somebody who, in your opinion, is getting the better, is somehow taken something from you that you deserve to get, that they've somehow stolen a piece of your pie. And I definitely relate to that because I'm sitting opposite Sarah Lieberman here. And there have been many times when
says Miss Talented who can do all things.
See, look, it's just all about perspective. There's been times when I've been praying for something in my own life, and Sarah has received the answer to my prayer, and it's very easy for me to sit here and think she's got what's mine. But what I'm not understanding in that particular moment is that sometimes the things that Sarah has been asked to do and given to do, she's not asked for those things, and actually they've been really difficult for her. And so we've both ended up, quote unquote, in a losing position because I'm not getting what I'm praying for and she's getting something she never asked for. And it's just as difficult to walk through both of those things. But I think one of the things that has really helped in particularly in our relationship is that I think I don't feel like I've ever been in competition with you, even though there have been a lot of crossovers in a lot of things we've done over the years. I've never felt in competition because we have done things together. And I think if you can get somehow into that mindset where you, instead of looking at your quote unquote competition as people who are going to take something from you, and you look at them as comrades instead, your task and your workforce is strengthened. And your ability to do what you're doing is better rather than you're weaker because there's someone else trying to steal it from you. And I think that's been one of the most amazing things to go through over the past years. There really have been. I mean, we joke around about how we do everything together, but it's not actually a joke. We have done a lot of things. And I think the stuff, probably the majority of what we've done could have been competitive had we let them. And it's just been the opposite experience of that, to be able to do so much together, with forces together rather than against each other.
Yeah, I think that the way to define that is by recognizing this, which is when we look from our human perspective, resources are finite.
Yeah.
And our access to those resources is defined. But God is not limited. So if God has given someone something that I want, or I think I want or need, it doesn't mean that he lacks the ability to give it to me.
Yeah.
Because let's say, okay, so to put this in simple terms, let's say you have $100,000
Dollars,
pennies.
pounds,
I was going to say dollars. I was like, that's a lot of money. Okay, let's say you have $100,000 in your bank account, right? You know that once you finish using that money, then it's gone, then that's it, you know? And so if you were now asked to take some of that money and put it towards somebody else's thing, you'd think that's a detraction.
Yeah.
That's a negative on me
Yeah.
because I'm taking away from the resources that I have.
Yeah.
But God's economy doesn't work like that because he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. And so he has a gazillion, trillion, gazillion money, right? He lacks no resources to give each of his children good things. It says, if your earthly father gives you good gifts, how much more would I, your heavenly father, give to you? So if we can come out of this prison of thought about this, this finite resources, because on a human level, it's true. You have to toil hard to get whatever it is. And, TV is full of reality TV and all these competitions and all these talents and all these gifts. And, throughout history, people have elevated people to the level of gods, for example, let's say in sports, right? If you are, really excellent at what you do in sports, you get huge amounts of money and people will worship you like a god. And so because you know how much work it takes to get there, you value and recognize the effort that it took. But for God, there is no limit. Therefore, for what he's asked me to do, if I can grow in his garden as the flower that he made me to be, I will lack no nourishment, no sustenance from the soil. I would lack no, dew every day that will come and wash me clean. I will lack no water to grow and to continue to bring life, and I will be able to be fruitful. And so if we can untangle, this lie in our mind that there's only a certain amount of goodness
to go around,
then we become free.
Yeah.
It's instant. You become free suddenly to just go forth with whatever talents he's given you and trust that he will make a way for you because, by the way, you're doing what he wants instead of going after some kind of earthly goal that you've set for yourself.
It's totally true. And I love what you said about God's economy. I think I was reminded of something I think we said in the first season, that the principles of the world always are in complete opposite to the principles of the kingdom. And what you've just said about the economy is actually, if you've got that $100,000, our worldly economy, I'm not an economist in any way. I can't even deal with a spreadsheet.
I think it's really funny that you're speaking about this right now.
Because I'm a very important person and I know important things.
And you're very good with numbers.
I'm excellent with numbers. I don't know what you're talking about. If you have that $100,000, it does not make earthly sense to give it to something else to forward somebody else's cause or gift or talent or whatever. But if you look at the principles of the kingdom, it is the opposite. Not only does it make better sense for you to invest in others, but God is always looking to reward and build up and bless his children. So this is not an easy thing to learn, for sure. And it does take risk, and it does take faith, and it does take a mind shift change. And Sarah will testify that I've walked through that. But if you understand that in God's economy, that is actually the better way to use your resource, because he will double what you've put out and he will reward what you give out and he will bless that. And he will bless you as a result of blessing others. Everything changes in the economy. And so what we think is a competition with somebody over there ends up being an opportunity to A, bless, and B, often collaborate in ways we'd not ever considered before. And I love when that happens, like this unexpected partnership comes out of an act of generosity, and God just can take, the kingdom has just expanded so much bigger and better and faster because of that than if we'd sat on our $100,000 and not given and not considered and not been, and we've just sat there threatened by everybody else, and so we've just guarded it.
So good. This is the principle of multiplication in the kingdom. People kind of shy away of trying to talk about multiplication because I think there's been a lot of doctrine that applies it personally, but let's take multiplication in the concept of, just as you were speaking, blessing other people and multiplying. We need to understand that to the extent, two things. Number one, God is not a debtor to any man. So you cannot outgive God. It just does not exist. So if you give to God, he will absolutely give to you. If you give as a joyful giver, you can't outgive God. There's no way that you can outgive his blessing over your life. And the second thing is that we partake in the fruit of that. So, if we live from an earthly perspective, you'll never get this. You'll never understand God's economy. You have to live from an eternal perspective. It's when you reach those pearly gates that you will look behind you, and when Jesus says, what have you brought me? What have you brought me? And you look behind, and there's a long line of people that you don't even know. You've never met them. You don't know their faces, but it's because you've sown into something or someone that has gone and impacted all those people. This is counted to you as part of your eternal reward. And so if we can change how we live, and instead of trying to build for this world where, storing up our treasures in this earth where the fire and the moth and, will destroy it. But if we store up this treasure in heaven, what does that mean when you translate it out to your own life? You know what? Then it's not about what other people are doing right now around me. It's actually about finding the path that God has for me, because in that path is the place of his multiplication, is the place of his blessing. Not necessarily that I would see it materially in my life, but I am going to see it in eternity.
Yeah, so true. But you know what's really hard when you move into that place is doing things with an agenda. So you cannot, first of all, God does not, it's not tit for tat. So if you give someone $1,000 of your 100,000, God does not then owe you 1,000 or 2,000, because he might double it. He doesn't owe you anything. When he blesses us as a result of us being a blessing, it comes often in very different shapes. And it may be, if you give financially, that he blesses you with food, or who knows, something completely different that is not a like for like situation. And it's very dangerous to go down a road of basically conditional generosity, where you'll be generous because God will repay me in the same way that I've been generous. It's not a thing. And also to not have an agenda where you give because you're going to get back, because God will bless, because you can trust on his blessing. It's about being a joyful giver. I think is all about just for the heck of it, the joy of being able to just bless someone and know that is a good representation of God for the heck of it. God loves, it's outrageous. What's the word? Outrageous grace. Outrageous
love.
Outrageous. It's actually stupid. It's actually
in our
stupid.
Worldly economy.
It does not make sense. It doesn't, there's no reason for it. There's nothing, you get nothing out of it. It's just, so I've, we've had a few opportunities as a family this year where we've had to make those choices about if and how much financially we want to give to certain things. And it's been really fun to just go nuts with the kids and be like, you know what? Let's just be really generous. We're not going to get this back. You're giving money towards somebody having an operation. You're not going to get a return on that. But to be able to see how God has blessed my children, for example, and I always ask God when we do these things with the family that they will see the blessing of God and that they will learn these principles themselves tangibly, so that when they're adults, they know they have that. They have a dependable experience to pull from. So yeah, it's an amazing thing to have that economy click, that understanding of that it's not a pie that is finite. Imagine that, an infinite pie.
Now you're talking.
Heaven.
I think that, just to be transparent and to be very real, even within the context of, living a transformed life, pursuing God and godliness in our life, I still very much have to guard my heart.
Of course.
About feeling this feeling, which is people taking quote unquote from me. So this is one, okay, I know I'm doing what God wants me to do. I know I'm in his purpose. I know, he's going to bless me for this. But there's still a part of me that wants quote unquote fairness or justice in some way, that when you see
Fair
people,
dues.
then when you see people like abusing that in a way, because they can,
You send me a humble pie emoji and that's how I know something's happened.
Yeah. And so, but wow, it's the example of Jesus who poured himself out, for the sake of this dysfunctional humanity.
Mm-hmm.
What a selfless act, to be willing to do that and not count that price. Because in my fragile humanity, I'm still human, I still think, what is this going to cost me? Or that's not fair, quote, like a child, okay, so let's say if you're a parent, you understand. You bring home a bar of chocolate, right? I have 3 kids, right? So it needs to be fairly and evenly distributed. Yes. I remember, this is really funny. I remember when I was in university, I was living with a family and they had twin boys. And the mom told me that when they were little, if she split chocolate or whatever, she would have to weigh it. Like it had to be on the scale the same, like to that extent. It was such a big deal between those 2 boys. So, so in our house, it's not like that, but it, the squares of the chocolate, like it's counted, he got, she got, it's this thing where you're called upon to give above and beyond, to be Christ-like. That I have to say, I still struggle with that because I still feel like, hey, that's not fair. Yeah. And there's this wonderful parable. Jesus tells this story about the guy who picks up these day workers to work in the vineyard, right? And he agrees with them to pay them a certain amount of money, right? And then he goes later in the day and he brings another set, and much later in the day and brings another set.
And they all get paid the same.
And they all get paid the same in the end. And the people who worked from the beginning, they get angry. Okay. Yeah. And then the master says, but I paid you what I agreed to pay you, And wow, like I think if we can kind of ascend to that,
I have to say, I relate to that guy who showed up at the end of the day, and got paid. I mean, that the first workers, that union would go nuts with that. But it's interesting because with the whole fairness thing, the whole chocolate weighing situation, I've definitely fought hard against that with my kids, and I think one of the things I have regularly said to them is,
life is not fair.
A, but B, if you want to have an identical life to your brother and sister, I can arrange that. And you can all have pickles, even if you don't like them. And you can all have peanut butter sandwiches, even if you don't like it. And you can all have the same amount of chocolate. But then you have to have all things all the same. And the minute my daughter realizes she'll have pickles for lunch when she hates them, and my son, who's allergic to peanut butter, suddenly realizes, oh, I'll get peanut butter sandwiches if we have the same life. Suddenly, we only want fairness equated with the things that we want. And if we actually want, like with you and me, when you get quote unquote the things I'm praying for, it comes with a whole set of negative stuff, which is really hard to walk through. And I don't want those things. I only want the good bits. And so if we try and compete with people's perfect version of perfect events, we're not understanding that it comes with a price. It comes with all kinds of difficult things we might not even be aware of that are there. And so when we think someone's stolen a piece of our pie, what we're not understanding is the strings that are attached to that piece of pie, or the difficulties that come with that call. And we don't see those things because we just see that, like you said, the glitz and the glam and whatever, and it's not real. It's not real.
I think that's so important and so good. I think a lot of times, that people look at people's lives from the outside and say, I want to be there. but they don't have a clue what it actually takes to be in that place
Yeah.
or what it actually looks like inside.
Mhm.
And if you, my mom says this a lot of times. She says, if all the people in the world threw their problems into a pile, if you threw all your problems in with everybody in the world, into a pile, you would quickly grab your problems back and just
Yes.
take them.
Yes.
Because you cannot imagine what people are living through,
Yeah.
and I don't care what it looks like on the outside. You cannot compare because you don't know what it's like to live through that. And I think that that's a really good thing, to find contentedness within what we've been given and to live a contented life, because that is actually the key to that everlasting joy and to that place that God can bless you. I think if you're festering and you're busy comparing and competing, you're holding onto something instead of allowing God to give to you, And so when we hold this dream, it took me a while to stop thinking about other people in other countries and other places and the opportunities that God is giving them in worship, for example, and recognize God has made me unique. He's given me my unique identity, and he has specific, unique tasks for me to do that, those people over there, they couldn't do them.
Yeah.
And I cannot measure like man measures. I need to measure the way God measures. And God measures our obedience, right?
Yes.
That's it. And so if I'm obedient, I'm going to live a blessed life, period.
Yes.
Regardless of what it looks like on the outside. And by the way, if I allow that transformation of God to work in my life, I will live out the desires of my heart, because those desires will be his desires. And there's nothing God loves more than fulfilling his will in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that really is the kind of way to summate it is this definition of success is obedience. And if we are doing what he has asked us to do, and we are doing it to the best of our ability with the gifts that he's given us, as the tools to fulfill that, then we are successful no matter what the world's definition of success in our field is. So then when you're introduced to a group of people who are creative and you sit there and you say, I'm a photographer, but I don't have, and I haven't done, and I'm not this, and I'm no good. That's not the case if you are operating in your gift and you're doing what you've been asked to do and you're stepping into your calling, then you have been.
Then you are successful, period.
Yeah. End of story.
Exactly.
That's all God ever wants from us is obedience and partnership. And if that's what we're giving and that's what we're doing, end of story.
Then
no
his
website
blessing
can make that different.
Well, we hope that you have been encouraged and propelling forward in your transformed life through this episode of our podcast.
We'll be back with another one next week.
Drop us a line.
Yeah.
Let us know if you have any feedback, any suggestions, ideas for season 3.
And also feel free to go and check out our online program, iAscend. It's i.ascend.org.il. There is a wealth of courses and hours of content and lots of exciting things for you to check out and be a part of. So we can't wait to connect with you further on there as well. We'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Make sure you're subscribed so that you never miss an episode. And if you have loved this show, please leave us a rating.
Yeah, we'd so appreciate it. And share it with your friends and your family. We are so excited that you have joined the journey.